Welcome to Verified, True Crime Investigations. I'm Sarah Chen.
And I'm Michael Torres. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating cold cases in criminal history, a mystery that stumped investigators for over 70 years.
We're talking about the Somerton Man case from Adelaide, Australia. December 1948. A well-dressed man is found dead on a beach with no identification, no wallet, and all the labels carefully removed from his clothing.
And that's just the beginning. This case has everything: encrypted codes, possible espionage, a mysterious woman, and questions that haunted investigators for 3 generations.
But here's why we're covering it now. In 2022, researchers claim they finally identified him using cutting-edge DNA genealogy. After 74 years, we potentially have a name.
Before we get into the story, if you're enjoying these deep dives into real, documented cases, make sure to follow us and leave a review. It genuinely helps us reach more people who appreciate thoroughly researched true crime.
Today's episode is structured a bit differently. We're going to walk through the original 1948 investigation, explore why this case became such an enduring mystery, examine the theories that emerged over decades, and then dive into how modern science may have finally cracked it.
And I have to say, Sarah, even knowing how this potentially ends, the journey is absolutely gripping.
It really is, because what makes this case so compelling isn't just the mystery. It's how it reflects changing forensic technology, the limits of mid-century investigation, and how cases we thought were unsolvable can suddenly break wide open.
So let's set the scene. It's summer in Australia, December 1948. The world is still recovering from World War II. The Cold War is just beginning, and on a beach in Adelaide, someone is about to make a very disturbing discovery.
Somerton Beach. It's about 11 kilometers southwest of Adelaide city center, a popular spot, especially in summer.
On the evening of November 30th, 1948, several witnesses reported seeing a man lying on a beach. According to statements later given to police, he was well-dressed, which seemed odd for the beach. He was positioned with his head resting against the seawall, legs extended, feet crossed.
Now, here's something important. Multiple people saw him that evening and assumed he was sleeping or perhaps intoxicated. One couple even noticed him raise his arm and let it fall, which they interpreted as him adjusting his position.
But when the same man was found the next morning, December 1st, in almost exactly the same position, it became clear something was very wrong.
A group of early morning beachgoers approached around 6:30 a.m. and realized he was dead. Police were called immediately.
And when investigators arrived, they encountered something that would launch one of the most perplexing cases in Australian history. Because this wasn't just an unidentified body, every single detail seemed designed to prevent identification.
Which raises our central question for today. Was this man trying to hide his identity? Was someone else trying to hide it? Or were investigators missing something obvious?
Those are the questions we'll explore today. Stick with us.
So let's paint the complete picture of what investigators found on Somerton Beach that December morning.
The victim was a man estimated to be in his 40s, approximately 5 foot 11 inches tall, with an athletic build. He had hazel eyes, fair to ginger hair that was graying at the temples. According to the autopsy report, he appeared to be in excellent physical condition.
His clothing was interesting, and I mean that in the investigative sense. He wore a white shirt, a red and blue tie, brown trousers, socks, and shoes. Over this, a brown knitted pullover and a fashionable gray and brown double-breasted jacket.
All quality items, well maintained, nothing suggesting homelessness or poverty.
But here's where it gets strange. Every single label had been removed from his clothing. The shirt, no label. The jacket, no label. Even the laundry marks that would typically help identify someone had been removed or were absent.
Now, you could argue maybe he just removed tags because they were itchy, right? People do that.
Sure, but every single one? And investigators noted these appeared to be deliberately removed with scissors or a blade, not just torn out carelessly.
His pockets provided no help. No wallet, no identification documents, no money. There was a bus ticket from Adelaide to Glenelg, a nearby beach suburb, some chewing gum, a pack of Army Club cigarettes, but inside were different cigarettes called quincetas.
That detail becomes relevant later when we talk about theories, but essentially he had cigarettes in the wrong pack.
And perhaps most mysteriously, in his fob pocket, that small pocket inside the larger trouser pocket, there was a scrap of paper with 2 words printed on it, Tamám Shud.
Which is Persian, or more specifically from a collection of poems called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. It translates roughly to ended or finished. It's actually the final phrase from that poetry collection.
So this man has no identification, removed labels, and he's carrying around the final words from a Persian poetry book. Already, this is unlike any typical death investigation.
The initial autopsy was conducted by Dr. John Barclay Bennett on December 2nd, 1948. And this is where medical science hit a wall.
Dr. Bennett found that the man's stomach contained what he described as a pasty substance, but couldn't identify any specific poison. The organs appeared congested. His spleen was enlarged to about 3 times normal size. There was blood in his stomach.
According to the official pathology report, the cause of death was listed as heart failure, but Dr. Bennett noted several unusual features that suggested poisoning, possibly by a substance that metabolizes quickly and doesn't leave obvious traces.
He specifically mentioned that the clinical picture was consistent with poisoning by a barbiturate or possibly digitalis, but toxicology couldn't confirm either.
And remember, this is 1948. Forensic toxicology was far less sophisticated than today. They simply didn't have the tools to detect many compounds.
Now, police launched a massive identification effort. They took fingerprints and checked them against every database available in Australia and internationally. Nothing.
They circulated photographs throughout Australia and to overseas police agencies. They checked missing persons reports. They contacted military records. Remember, World War II had just ended, so there were extensive military personnel databases.
Dental records were examined and circulated to dentists across Australia. His teeth were in excellent condition, by the way, which suggested regular dental care. But again, no matches.
The investigation was thorough. Detective Sergeant Lionel Lean led the case, and he was meticulous, but every lead evaporated.
Let's talk about the Rubaiyat connection, because this becomes central to the case.
Right. So investigators knew this Tamám Shud paper came from a book. They launched a public appeal asking if anyone had a copy of the Rubaiyat with the piece torn from the final page.
And remarkably, in late July 1949, so 8 months after the body was found, a man came forward. He told police that in late November or early December 1948, he'd found a copy of the Rubaiyat thrown in the back seat of his unlocked car, which was parked near Somerton Beach.
The timing was right. The location was right. And when they examined this book, sure enough, the final page had Tamám Shud torn from it. It matched the paper found on the body.
So now we have physical evidence linking this book directly to our unidentified man.
But here's where it gets even stranger. On the back cover of this book, someone had written 5 lines of apparently random letters. It looked like code.
The sequence reads WRGOBABD, MLIA1I, WTBIMPNATP, MLIABOAIQC, ITTMSATSMAGAB.
And to this day, Michael, this code has never been definitively cracked.
Cryptographers have tried for decades. Some think it's a one-time pad cipher, basically unbreakable without the key. Others think it might be an acrostic, where first letters spell something. Some even think it might not be a code at all, but abbreviations or notes meaningful only to one person.
There was also a phone number penciled in the back of the book. Police traced it to a nurse named Jessica Thompson, though that wasn't her real name. She'd previously gone by Jestin.
And this is where the investigation takes a very human turn. Police interviewed her, and according to the official records, she looked at photos of the deceased man and said she didn't recognize him.
But witnesses who were present said she appeared shocked, possibly even frightened. One officer later stated she seemed to know more than she was saying.
Jessica Thompson, whose real name was Jessica Harkness, told police she'd given a copy of the Rubaiyat to a man named Alfred Boxall during the war. She suggested maybe this was him.
But here's the thing. Police tracked down Alfred Boxall. He was alive, living in Sydney, and he still had the book Jessica had given him. So that theory collapsed.
Jessica maintained for the rest of her life that she didn't know the Somerton man. She died in 2007, and if she had secrets, she took them to her grave.
But investigators at the time noted something interesting. Jessica's daughter, born in 1947, and later Jessica's son, had certain unusual physical characteristics that some people noted were also present in the Somerton man.
Now, we need to be careful here, because we're talking about real people. But this became relevant decades later when DNA testing became possible.
At the time, though, police hit wall after wall. No identification, no known associates, no clear cause of death, a mysterious code, a book connection that led nowhere definitive.
By 1949, the active investigation began to slow. It never officially closed, but with no new leads, there was only so much they could do.
And that's how it remained. For decades, the Somerton man became one of those legendary mysteries. Books were written, documentaries made, theories spun, but his identity remained unknown.
Until 2022. But before we get there, we need to understand what investigators were actually dealing with, what evidence they had, and what theories emerged.
So let's break down the actual evidence systematically, because this case has accumulated so many theories over the years that it's easy to lose track of what we actually know versus what people speculate.
Good point. Let's start with the hard physical evidence documented in police files.
First, the autopsy findings. Dr. Bennett's report noted several specific observations. The man's pupils were dilated and unequal in size. His spleen was significantly enlarged, about 250 grams, when normal is around 150 grams.
There was blood mixed with food in his stomach. The liver showed signs of congestion. His lungs were also congested with some degree of pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs.
According to Dr. Bennett's testimony at the inquest, these findings were consistent with heart failure, but the clinical picture suggested a rapidly acting poison. He specifically stated, "I'm quite convinced the death could not have been natural."
But, and this is crucial, no poison was actually detected. The toxicology of 1948 tested for common poisons, arsenic, strychnine, cyanide, morphine, and several barbiturates. All came back negative.
Dr. Bennett theorized it might have been something like digitalis or a rare poison that metabolizes quickly, but that remains speculation. The actual cause of death, based purely on evidence, is undetermined.
Now, let's talk about the timeline, because witness testimony is really important here.
On November 30th, 1948, so the evening before he was found dead, multiple witnesses saw him on the beach. A couple, the Johnsons, walked past him around 7 p.m. They noticed him because he was dressed formally for a beach setting.
They specifically recalled that he raised his right arm and let it fall. They interpreted this as him maybe reaching for a cigarette or just adjusting position.
Another witness, Olive Neal, was walking with her husband around 7:30 p.m. She told police she saw the same man in the same position. No movement at that point.
So, somewhere between 7 and 7:30 p.m., we have our last confirmed sign of life. By 6:30 a.m. the next morning, he's found dead in virtually the same spot.
The position of the body was documented carefully. He was resting against the seawall with his head tilted to the left. His legs were extended straight out, feet crossed. His left arm was on the ground, right arm positioned as if it had fallen across his body.
Police noted there was no sign of struggle, no defensive wounds, no evidence of violence. His clothing was neat and undisturbed.
There was an unlit cigarette resting on his collar, which some investigators found odd. It's as if he'd placed it there and never got around to lighting it, or someone else positioned it after death.
Now, let's discuss the items found on his body and what they tell us.
The clothing first. The suit was identified as of American manufacture or American style, though this couldn't be definitively confirmed without labels.
His shoes were new or nearly new, well polished, the type of shoes you'd wear to an office or formal occasion, not particularly practical for beach walking.
His pockets contained that bus ticket from Adelaide to Glenig, dated November 30th, the day he died, a second unused train ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a packet of juicy fruit gum, and that Army Club cigarette packet, containing 7 Cancita cigarettes.
The cigarette detail is interesting because it suggests he either preferred Cancitas and just used whatever packet was handy, or someone else had filled that packet. It's a small detail, but adds to the oddness.
In his jacket pockets, they found a comb which had been used recently. His fingernails were clean and well-maintained. Everything about him suggested someone who took care of his appearance.
Which makes the removed labels even stranger, right? This is clearly someone who cared about presentation and quality. Why deliberately remove identifying marks?
The Tamám Shud paper itself was analyzed. It was a scrap about 1.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch, torn, not cut, from a book. The paper matched the type used in a specific edition of the Rubaiyat published in New Zealand.
When that copy of the book turned up months later, police examined it thoroughly. Beyond the code on the back cover, there was that phone number. And, faintly penciled inside, there appeared to be some other markings, though these were never clearly photographed or documented at the time.
The code itself has been the subject of intense analysis. In 2009, professional codebreaker Alf Boxall, not the same Boxall from earlier, analyzed it and concluded it didn't follow patterns typical of standard ciphers.
Some cryptographers think the letters might be the first letters of words in a message. Others suggest it could be shorthand or abbreviations. Or it could be a one-time pad, which is essentially unbreakable without the key.
There was also analysis suggesting some letters looked crossed out or written over, making the original sequence unclear.
In 2009, researchers used high-resolution imaging and thought they could see additional marks or corrections, but nothing was conclusively deciphered.
Let's talk about the identification attempts because they were genuinely extensive for 1948.
Police took fingerprints and sent them to every Australian state, to New Zealand, to Britain, and to several other countries. They checked against military records, immigration records, and criminal databases. Nothing matched.
His photograph was published in newspapers across Australia and sent to police agencies internationally. They received hundreds of tips, but none led to positive identification.
Dental records were especially promising because the man had excellent, well-maintained teeth with several distinctive fillings. Dentists across Australia reviewed the chart. Again, no match.
One lead seemed promising, a missing person named E.C. Johnson, who had disappeared from Sydney. But when his brother viewed the body, he confirmed it wasn't him.
Another theory involved a missing man from Melbourne. Same result. Family confirmed it wasn't their relative.
What's remarkable is that in 1948 Australia, the population was much smaller, only about 7.5 million people, and yet this man couldn't be identified.
This suggests either he was from overseas or he was living so far off the grid that no one reported him missing.
Or, as some theorists suggest, people knew exactly who he was but had reasons not to come forward.
The inquest was held in June 1949. The coroner returned an open finding, stating the man's identity was unknown and the cause of death could not be determined with certainty, though poisoning was suspected.
And then the case went cold. Not forgotten, there were always people interested, always amateur investigators taking another look, but no new official breakthroughs.
In the 1970s, there was renewed interest when researcher Derek Abbott, a professor at the University of Adelaide, began investigating. He was particularly interested in the possible family connection to Jessica Thompson.
Abbott noted that Jessica's son, Robin Thompson, who died in 2009, had several unusual physical features, particularly positioned ears, a specific dental pattern, and certain other characteristics that were also noted in the Somerton man.
And this brings us to the DNA angle, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's first talk about the theories that dominated this case for decades.
Because there have been many theories, and separating evidence-based possibilities from pure speculation is crucial to understanding this case. So, over 70 years, the Somerton Man case generated countless theories. Let's walk through the major ones and evaluate them against actual evidence.
Theory number 1, and probably the most famous, he was a spy.
This theory is based on several factors. The timing, December 1948, the Cold War is beginning. The location, Adelaide had significant defense installations and was near the Woomera rocket testing range.
The encrypted code, the removed labels, the mysterious circumstances all seem to fit a spy narrative. Some theorists proposed he was a Soviet agent. Others suggested he was working for Western intelligence.
Let's evaluate this objectively. What evidence supports it?
The code is genuine and has never been cracked. The deliberate removal of identifying markers suggests someone who didn't want to be identified. The possible use of poison, if it was poison, could suggest professional assassination.
And against?
There's no documentary evidence connecting him to any intelligence agency. No witnesses reporting suspicious activity. No recovered documents or materials suggesting espionage.
Australian intelligence services were contacted during the investigation. According to declassified documents, they had no information on him. Now, you could argue they deny it anyway, but there's no hard evidence.
Professor Abbott, who researched this case extensively, stated in several interviews that while the spy theory is romantic, there's nothing concrete supporting it beyond circumstantial oddities.
Theory number 2, he was Jessica Thompson's lover, possibly the father of her child, and something about that relationship led to his death. This theory is based on Jessica's apparent reaction to seeing his photo, her name appearing in the book, and the physical similarities between Robin Dobson and the Somerton Man.
For this theory, the phone number connection is real. The physical similarities, as noted by some researchers, are striking in certain photographs, and Jessica's behavior when interviewed suggested she might have known more than she admitted.
Against, Jessica consistently denied knowing him. Alfred Boxall, the man she'd actually had a relationship with during the war, was located alive, and without DNA evidence, the physical similarity could be coincidental.
There's also the question of motive. Even if they had a relationship, why would that lead to an elaborate poisoning on a public beach?
Theory 3, suicide. He deliberately removed his identification and took poison on the beach.
The Tamám Shud message, meaning ended or finished, could be read as a suicide note. The careful positioning, the formal dress, the remote location chosen at night.
But against this, there's no identified poison found. Most suicides involve methods with clear evidence. And why the code? Why the elaborate mystery if you're ending your own life?
Unless the mystery itself was the point. Some researchers have suggested this could be a kind of final puzzle or statement, though that seems quite theatrical.
Theory 4, accidental poisoning or natural death, and the mystery's overblown.
Maybe he had a heart condition. Maybe he accidentally ingested something. Maybe the removed labels are just eccentricity. Maybe the code is just notes that mean nothing.
The problem with this is it requires multiple odd coincidences. The labels, the toad, the Tamám Shud paper, the inability to identify him, all of these would need benign, coincidental explanations.
Occam's razor usually suggests the simplest explanation, but in this case, it's hard to know what that even is. Every theory requires some assumptions.
In 2010, there was a theory proposed by an author named Carrie Greenwood. She suggested he might have been a runner, someone paid to transport illegal goods, possibly drugs or black market items, in post-war Australia.
That could explain the removed labels, making him untraceable if caught. It could explain why no one reported him missing if he worked in illegal circles. But again, no concrete evidence.
There have been specific identity theories over the years. In 2011, researcher Jerry Feltus published a book suggesting the Somerton men might have been H.C. Reynolds, a man who disappeared around that time.
But when possible relatives were located and DNA was compared, This was much later, using advanced testing. It didn't match.
Another theory involved a man named Roy Webb, but again, DNA testing eventually ruled that out.
And this brings us to the modern era of the case. In the 2000s, Professor Derek Abbott began a systematic research effort focusing on DNA.
In 2009, he obtained a sample of hair believed to be from the Somerton man, which had been taken during the autopsy and was still held in police files.
He had DNA extracted and analyzed. It was mitochondrial DNA, passed down through the maternal line, not the more specific nuclear DNA that would give a definitive identity.
The mitochondrial DNA analysis suggested haplogroup H4A1A11A, which is relatively rare and appears primarily in European populations. This confirmed he was likely of European descent, but didn't narrow it further.
Abbott also pursued the Jessica Thompson connection. Her daughter had died, but Abbott actually married the granddaughter. Yes, he married into the family he was researching.
Which, from a research ethics standpoint, is complicated.
Very complicated. But it gave him access to DNA to compare with the Somerton man's samples.
In 2018, and then more extensively in 2021, the case got renewed attention when investigative genetic genealogy, the technique used to catch the Golden State Killer, advanced to the point where it might be applicable.
This technique involves taking DNA and comparing it against large genealogical databases to find distant relatives, then building family trees to identify the person.
In 2021, Abbott partnered with genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, who specializes in forensic genealogy. They worked on constructing family trees based on DNA matches.
And in July 2022, they made an announcement. They believe the Somerton man was a man named Charles Webb, an electrical engineer born in Melbourne in 1905.
Now, this is where we need to be very careful about how we present this information.
Absolutely. Because while this identification made headlines worldwide, it's not officially confirmed by Australian authorities.
The South Australia police stated they could not verify the identification. They noted that the DNA sample used was from hair that had been stored for decades and may have degraded or been contaminated.
Abbott's team claims they verified the identity through multiple family tree connections and are confident in their conclusion. But without official police confirmation and without more definitive DNA testing, it remains a claimed identification rather than a proven one.
This is an important distinction. In science, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The method Abbott used is valid. It solved other cases, but the quality of the original DNA sample is questionable.
In 2013, there were attempts to have the body exhumed for more definitive testing. This would allow fresh tissue samples and potentially nuclear DNA analysis that could conclusively prove or disprove the Charles Webb identification.
As of late 2024, those exhumation requests faced bureaucratic delays, but there seemed to be movement toward approval, so we may yet get definitive answers.
So where does that leave us? Do we believe the Charles Webb identification?
That's what we're going to discuss in our analysis segment. Let's take a moment and then dive into what we really think is going on here.
Okay, Sarah, we've laid out all the facts, all the theories, and the recent DNA claims. What's your take on this case?
I think we need to separate two questions. Who was he and what happened to him? Because the DNA work may answer the first question, but it doesn't necessarily solve the mystery of how and why he died.
That's a good distinction. Let's start with identity. Do you think Derek Abbott's identification of Charles Webb is credible?
I think the methodology is sound. Forensic genetic genealogy has proven extremely effective in other cases. The technique itself isn't in question.
But
The quality of the source material, that hair sample from 1948, is questionable. DNA degrades over time. Hair that's been stored in evidence for 70+ years could be contaminated, degraded, or mislabeled.
Abbott's team claims they took extensive precautions and verified their results. They built family trees that converged on Charles Webb from multiple directions.
Which is compelling, but without independent verification by the police using fresh tissue samples from an exhumation, I think we have to say it's a strong possibility rather than a confirmed fact.
Fair enough. Let's assume for argument's sake that it is Charles Webb. What does that tell us about the case?
Well, Charles Webb was born in Melbourne in 1905. According to Abbott's research, he trained as an electrical engineer. He was married at one point, but separated from his wife.
So, not a spy, not a mysterious foreign agent, just an Australian man with a normal, if somewhat troubled background.
Which actually makes the mystery deeper in some ways. Because if he's just a regular person, why all the secrecy? Why remove every label? Why the code?
Maybe they weren't removed for some elaborate spy reason. Maybe he was just eccentric. Maybe he had reasons related to his personal life.
The Jessica Thompson connection becomes even more puzzling. If he is Charles Webb, was there a relationship there? Abbott's team has tried to find connections but haven't found documentary evidence of them knowing each other.
Although absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially for relationships in the 1940s that people might have kept quiet.
True, but we're speculating now. Let's talk about cause of death. What do you think happened?
Honestly, I lean toward poisoning, but possibly accidental or self-administered.
Why do you say that?
The autopsy findings, enlarged spleen, congested organs, the rapid onset. Dr. Bennett was experienced and was convinced it wasn't natural, but the fact no specific poison was found suggests either something rare or something that metabolized before testing.
There are compounds that fit that profile, certain digitalis preparations, some barbiturates, even some things that wouldn't have been testable in 1948.
If it was suicide, it explains the formal dress, the symbolic Tamám Shud message, the beach location. It's tragic, but it makes a certain kind of sense.
But it doesn't explain the code. That still bothers me. Why leave an encrypted message if you're ending your life?
Unless it was meant for someone specific, maybe someone who would understand it.
That's possible. Or maybe, and hear me out, maybe it's not a code at all.
What do you mean?
What if it's just notes, abbreviations meaningful to him but gibberish to everyone else? We've been assuming it's this elaborate cipher, but maybe it's just notes.
Like a shopping list or reminders written in personal shorthand.
Exactly. And then after he dies mysteriously, everyone assumes it must be code because everything else is so strange. Confirmation bias.
That's actually a pretty compelling argument. We don't know what we're looking at, so we assume it's the most mysterious thing.
The removed labels still puzzle me, though. That seems deliberate.
What if he was homeless or transient and removed labels to resell clothes or repurpose them? What if he was just very private and didn't like labels?
Possible, but he was so well groomed. His clothes were in good condition. He doesn't fit the profile of someone who's homeless or desperately hard up.
Unless he recently became homeless or was traveling and trying to stretch money.
I think that's reaching, but I see your point. The more we try to explain this case simply, the more questions we have.
Which has been the fundamental problem for 70 years. Every answer creates new questions.
Let's talk about what this case tells us about forensic science and cold cases.
It's a perfect example of how technology changes everything. In 1948, they had fingerprints, dental records, and basic toxicology. That was it.
Today, we have DNA, forensic genetic genealogy, advanced toxicology that can detect parts per billion, digital reconstruction, databases that connect globally in seconds.
Cases that were unsolvable in 1948 can potentially be cracked now. We've seen it with the Golden State Killer, with dozens of cold cases solved through genetic genealogy.
But it also shows the limitations. Even with DNA, we may identify him, but that doesn't tell us what happened. Motive, method, circumstance, Those require context and evidence beyond just the name.
And it raises questions about privacy and ethics. Should we be using genealogical databases to identify people who died anonymously?
That's a genuine ethical question. Some people think solving mysteries and bringing closure is worth it. Others worry about privacy implications.
For me, in cases like this where there's no evidence of foul play by the deceased, and where identification could help answer historical questions, I think it's appropriate.
I agree, though I understand the concerns. What about the families involved? Jessica Thompson's family, for instance. They didn't ask to be part of this decades-long investigation.
That's another ethical dimension. Derek Abbott literally married into the family he was researching. That's complicated at best.
It compromises objectivity, certainly. Though, to be fair, he's been transparent about it, and his work has been peer-reviewed.
True, but it shows how cold cases can consume people. They become obsessions.
Speaking of which, and this is more philosophical, why do you think this case captures imagination so much?
I think it's the perfect storm of mystery. An unidentified person, which is inherently unsettling, a possible code, a cryptic message, potential espionage, possible romance. Every element adds another layer.
And it's solvable, theoretically. It's not supernatural or impossible. It's just complicated. That makes people think they can figure it out.
Exactly. Amateur detectives, professional researchers, everyone thinks maybe they'll see the connection everyone else missed.
Has this case taught you anything about how we should approach true crime stories?
Yeah, actually, it's taught me that uncertainty is okay. We don't always get neat answers, and speculating is fine, but we need to be honest about what's speculation versus what's proven.
I think it also shows that sometimes the simplest explanation, guy died of natural causes or suicide and happened to be eccentric, might be the right one, even if it's less exciting than spy theories.
But we may never know for sure. And you know what? That's okay. Some mysteries persist.
So, let's wrap this up. What do we actually know about the Somerton man case?
We know a well-dressed man died on Somerton Beach on or around December 1st, 1948. We know his identity couldn't be established through conventional means. We know he had a scrap of paper with Tamám Shud on it, connecting to a book with a possible code.
We know police conducted an extensive investigation and couldn't determine cause of death or identity. We know that in 2022, researchers claimed to identify him as Charles Webb using DNA genealogy, though this hasn't been officially confirmed.
We don't know definitively how he died, why he was on that beach, or whether the mysterious elements of the case were intentional mystery or just coincidental oddities.
As of October 2025, the case remains technically unsolved in official records, though there's a strong possibility the identity question may be answered definitively if exhumation proceeds and produces viable DNA for testing.
The code has never been cracked. The Tamám Shud message's significance remains unclear, and the full story may never be known.
Which brings us to you, our listeners. What do you think happened? Do you believe the Charles Webb identification? Do you think he was murdered, committed suicide, or died of natural causes?
Join the conversation on our social media. Tag us with your theories. And here's a specific question. Do you think the code is actually a code, or could it be something more mundane?
Next week, we're covering another case that was recently solved through DNA, the 1988 murder of April Tinsley. It's a case that showed both the horror of violent crime and the incredible persistence of investigators who never gave up.
If you enjoyed today's deep dive into the Somerton Man mystery, please follow us, leave a review, and share this episode with other true crime fans who appreciate thorough, ethical research.
Remember, these are real cases involving real people. We try to honor that in how we tell these stories.
Thanks for listening to Verified, True Crime Investigations.
Stay curious, everyone.
And stay critical.